Story 1. I'm a guy who's 38 years old, and a pretty cool thing happened about 10 years back. I married my college girlfriend. Yeah, we were those lovebirds who met during our school days, and before we decided to tie the knot, we were together for like 6 whole years. So if you do the math, that's a whopping 16 years of knowing each other. Pretty long time, huh? Now I'll talk about my wife, but I'm gonna call her Emma. She's the same age as me, 37, and was not just a classmate of mine back in the college days, but was also someone super special to me. You could say she was the peanut butter to my jelly, the perfect match, and honestly, she really was that person for me. So a month ago, one of Emma's buddies decided to have this massive, dreamlike wedding in Las Vegas. Imagine the kind of weddings you see in movies. Yeah, it was one of those. I was on the guest list too, but guess what? My job threw a curveball at me, and I had to miss out on the festivities because of some urgent work stuff that came up that week. The wedding was this big deal that went on for a week. When Emma got back from the Vegas wedding, something was off. She wasn't her usual chatty and lively self. Instead, she was super quiet. Being the concerned hubby, I was like, "Hey, is everything cool?" And she told me she was just wiped out from the wedding marathon. It sounded reasonable because, let's be honest, a week of partying and wedding stuff would tire anyone out. So I decided to just give her some space to chill and get back to her usual self. After Emma got back from that big, fancy wedding in Las Vegas, things between us started to get a bit rocky. It wasn't just that she was quiet. She actually started acting really cold towards me. Imagine trying to chat with someone, and they just don't seem to want to talk back, or worse, they get annoyed at every little thing you say. That's what it was like with Emma. Every time I tried to start a conversation, she'd either ignore me or snap at me, saying she just wasn't in the mood for talking. And it's been like this for almost a month now since she got back. Now, we've always been super close, but since she's been back, we haven't had any of those special moments couples share. To add to all this weirdness, I found something in her bag yesterday that's got me really worried. It was a hospital bill for an STD test that she took the day after she got back from the wedding. That struck me as really odd. Why would she need to take that test all of a sudden, and why wouldn't she tell me about it? This whole situation feels like a massive warning sign to me. I love Emma more than anything, but I'm not the kind of person who can just ignore something this big. I don't want to jump to conclusions or start a fight without knowing all the facts, especially since I care so much about our relationship. I want to handle this the right way because I really value what we have together, and I don't want to mess things up. So in a moment where I just couldn't sit still with all these worries buzzing in my head, I went full detective mode on the internet. I found this place where a bunch of people shared stories kind of similar to what I'm going through, finding out their partner took an STD test on the down low. And a lot of these stories hinted that it might be because of cheating. That's why I ended up here, tossing my own story into the mix, trying to figure out if I'm making a mountain out of a molehill or if there's really something to worry about. Now I've got to confess something that's been eating at me. A few days ago, I let my curiosity get the better of me, and I snooped through Emma's phone. I checked her messages, her call history, even her social media, but I came up empty. Everything looked normal, no red flags or hidden secrets. And now I'm stuck feeling guilty for not trusting her enough and snooping around. But at the same time, I'm wondering if being cautious is actually a good thing. I've been toying with the idea of reaching out to the friends who were with Emma at the wedding, just to see if they noticed anything off. The problem is, it was her school friend's wedding, and we don't really hang out with that crowd. So I don't know them well enough to start asking personal questions without raising suspicion. It's like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. Not sure if I should feel bad for doubting her or if I'm just being smart about the whole situation. The situation feels so weird because in the last 10 years of being together with Emma, she never gave me any reason to suspect her. We were always very transparent with each other. And I forgot to mention that the bill indicated that she made the appointment on the day after returning from the trip. However, the date of the test mentioned was yesterday's, and the date of the report is given after a week. Emma's behavior was concerning me from the time she returned from the trip. I checked her phone a few days ago but couldn't find anything. Yesterday, when Emma returned home after the test, she looked very exhausted and intense. I got suspicious when she carefully hid her bag inside the wardrobe. Usually, she leaves it on the table or the couch. I behaved as if I didn't notice it, but I was keeping a close eye on every move of hers. When she went to the washroom for a shower, I checked her purse and found the hospital bill for the STD test. Honestly, if she feels a need to hide it, she's done something she feels guilty of. The only other reason she'd get tested for an STD is if she thought you were the one cheating. On top of it all, the timing of it is just too suspicious to not mean anything. Update 1. Hello. After reading the comments on my post, I realized they didn't give any background information about me or Duff. I didn't think it was relevant to the post. Nevertheless, I have replied to a few of you in the comments, but for general information, let me add a few facts. We graduated from the same college. We both are software engineers and work for different companies. We have a 6-year-old son. Financially, we had a stable life, a quite decent one. We were a pretty happy family until now, until Duff decided to screw up everything. After discovering the medical bill for an STD test from Emma's purse, I was restless. The comments on my last post, as well as the stories of other victims, all indicated one thing. Emma cheated on me. Initially, I wanted to wait until the test results were out before the confrontation, but I was choking up from the inside. I could no longer hold it back. Emma also noticed that I was behaving differently the day I made the post. She even asked me if everything was all right. I just nodded and faked a smile. She thought that maybe I was retaliating for her rude behavior. So a day after I made my post, we sat at the dinner table. As we started eating, Emma again asked me if I was doing well. I nodded yes, but after a while, I couldn't hold back myself, and I blurted out, "How was your STD test?" She looked at me shocked. I repeated, "Yeah, that STD test you took a few days back." She turned pale and asked me how I discovered it. I said, "It doesn't matter." Then she said the most classic line, "I can explain." I stared at her straight and told her to explain. She sighed and took a deep breath while I kept staring at her patiently. She started weeping. The moment she started sobbing, my heart sank. I understood that my suspicions were true. She held my hand and told me to believe her. I told her I could believe her only if she said anything, but instead of saying anything, she pulled her chair closer to me, leaned on my shoulder, held my arms tightly, and cried. I let her emotions flow out. In the last 6 years of our relationship, I had never left her crying, even with her slightest tears. I used to hug and cheer her up, but this time, I sat and remained unmoved. She tried to come closer to me and hold my arms as tightly as she could, but I didn't hug her back. I sat there cold, like a nice rock. Finally, when she was done crying, she freed my arms and confessed everything. It was on her friend's bachelor trip, in the week-long wedding festivities of her friend. The first 2 days were a bachelor trip to Vegas. The event manager had arranged for strippers, male escorts, and whatnot. That day, I got to know so many new terms that I was not at all familiar with earlier. She told me that the bride and her other friends enjoyed the services right from the start on day 1, but Emma resisted. Her friends forced her, but she didn't. She saw the bride and her other friends having a thrilling time, fulfilling all their fantasies with those escorts, but she restrained herself. I usually used to believe her, as she was never a liar, but this time it was just difficult for me to fully trust her story. I asked her if she did it because she felt out of place. She said that her bride's friend convinced her that she had never seen any other man in the last 16 years. Hence, she needed to taste new ones. Her friends elaborated on how these escorts use several techniques to give them new age pleasures. Emma still didn't give in, but her friend convinced her for an intimate massage. She finally gave in to the peer pressure and said yes to the massage. She thought the massage would not qualify as cheating, and she could also dodge the peer pressure. However, the masseur was an escort. After the back massage, he started undressing her fully. She resisted, but he said it was an intimate massage, so she had to undress. She confessed to losing her self-control during the intimate massage and gave in. One thing led to another, and she cheated on me. But this was not enough. When Emma told her friends about her encounter with the masseur, they cheered for her and insisted she should explore further. They also assured Emma that it would be confidential and nothing would ever reach me. Emma thought she had already done it once and cheated on me, so there was no point in resisting further. She decided to better explore her fantasy. I was glad that she honestly confessed everything. She knew I wouldn't forgive her, even if she did it once. I just sat there lifeless, trying to absorb whatever Emma said. I knew my life was going to change. The woman in front of me was the love of my life, and that was why her betrayal inflicted such a grave pain on me. Emma nudged me to say something, as I had not spoken a word since she confessed. I buried my face in my palms. She tried to hold my hand and lift my face, but I resisted. Finally, when I looked at her, I said, "I'm going to file for divorce." She was shocked and said, "You shouldn't make an impulsive decision because we have a son." I yelled at her to stop showing her fake concern for our son and our family. If she had the slightest concern for the family, she wouldn't have done what she did. I took my car keys and left the house. She tried to follow me, but I shrugged her off. I drove off to my friend's place who was living alone. He recently had a divorce, that's a separate story. Anyway, I drank until I passed out the next morning. I called in sick at work. My friend went to the office while I lounged on his couch, searching for divorce lawyers. I stumbled upon a lawyer who was my junior in school. He was added to my Instagram account, so I messaged him. He responded within a couple of hours. I asked for a call. He sensed the urgency and desperateness in my messages and called me back within 30 minutes. His next available appointment slot was about 4 days later, but since I knew him, he asked if I could meet him late in the evening after work. I readily agreed. Instead of calling me at his office, he asked me to meet for a drink. So the last evening Emma confessed cheating, and the next evening, I was sitting with my lawyer and discussing my divorce. He asked me to sleep over my decision and see if the emotions subsided. I decided to give her a chance. I told him that I was mindfully making this decision. I relayed my divorce terms to him, and he reassured me of starting the paperwork immediately. I requested him to fast-track the process because I want to get done with it as soon as possible. Anyone who heard me would have assumed I was making an impulsive decision, but I was not. I loved her, but not more than my self-respect. I told him that I trusted Emma with my life, and if I'm making this decision, it is definitely severe. I cannot let her get away with the cheating. The next day, I went home in the afternoon. I thought she would be at work, but she was at home. She had become miserable just in the last few days. As soon as she saw me, she rushed towards me and tried to hug me, asking me where I had been for the last 2 days and why I was not responding to her calls and messages. I wanted to push her away, but she looked so pale and fragile that I could not do so. I let her hug me, but I didn't touch her. I stood stiff. She kept saying sorry, but I remained unmoved. She held my face with her palms and nudged me to say something. She said my silence was killing her. I asked about her son. She said she had dropped him to my parents' house for a few days. I freed myself, went to my room, and bolted it. She would not have let me pack if I had let her in. I packed some of my clothes, laptop, tabs, and essentials and hurriedly left the house while she was in the kitchen. She followed me outside, trying to stop me, but I didn't look back and drove off. I checked into a hotel and then went to my parents' house to meet my son. I wanted to tell them everything, but I resisted because I had something else in mind. It's almost a week now. I'm working from the hotel. I have taken permission to work remotely for this month. Emma tried to contact me through all possible means. Calls, texts, voicemails, showing up at my workplace, crashing at my friend's place, and local bars and restaurants that I had often visited. One of our common friends called me today and asked me if I was fine. He said that he'd been looking for me in the entire city. I asked him if she had told him the reason. He said that whoever is asking Emma has been telling them that I left the house after a severe argument about something. I said yes, I'm safe, but I needed some time to cool off. A few hours ago, I called up my lawyer to follow up regarding the divorce papers. He said to have it shipped to me in the next few days. I'm waiting until the divorce papers arrive. I'll make an update once I sort out this case. I'm sorry. There's no excuse for that. She shouldn't have felt like she needed to explore those fantasies with anyone other than you, her husband. Not only that, but what type of friends talk their married friend into cheating? Now look at what she's done. She's completely thrown her life away as if all those years meant nothing. I wonder if those fantasies of hers were worth it. Update 2. It took a while for me to update this, but I wanted to sort out everything before making an update. This would be my last update. So after 10 days of that day, the divorce paper arrived. It was scary. The next morning I went to my house. The situation was the same. Emma was lifeless, lying on the couch while my son was playing in the living room. He ran towards me and hugged me as if we hadn't met last week. This time, Emma was stiff. She didn't hug me. Instead, she gave me a cold stare. I played with my son for a few minutes and then left him alone and sat on the chair. She looked at me with a straight face and asked what I wanted. I smirked at her question without saying anything. She asked if there was anything she could do to make things better. I still remained quiet. After a while, she said, "Look, I know I've hurt you and ruined everything, but I'm guilty about it. I accept what I did was a grave crime, but you need to see that I could have skipped the STD test, and you would never have known about it. But I took a test for your safety and avoided STDs to protect you. I love you. I'm sorry for what I did, but you also need to acknowledge that I honestly confessed to the truth when I could have easily cooked up some lies. So we need to solve this situation instead of running away from it. Tell me if there's anything I can do to fix this." I told her yes. I told her to confess her cheating in front of my parents and hers. She gave me a stern look. I said, "What, you can't do it, right?" She took a deep breath and said, "If this was something that would make you happy and satisfied, I was ready to take a shot." I asked her to go on and invite them in the evening. After staring at me for a couple of minutes and seeing the coldness in my eyes, she took her phone and called up her parents and mine, one by one, asking them to join us this evening. After the call, she looked at me with defeated eyes. I took a shower and was surfing on my iPad when she entered the room and said she had prepared lunch for us. I wanted to avoid it, but I knew from within that it was going to be our last meal as a family, so I went and sat at the table. She served me and my son and we all ate together. I felt bad seeing my son's face. It was mostly the last time he was having a meal together with his parents. I know I would be called egotistic and chauvinist for destroying my happy family for just one mistake of my wife, but I don't care what others think of me. I know when my son grows up, he will be glad that I chose my self-respect over my love and emotions. It is necessary that a child grows up with happy parents who might be living separately rather than frustrated parents who are trapped in a broken marriage. And our marriage was broken at the moment Emma opened her legs for other men. After lunch, Steve took our son to his room for an afternoon nap. After putting him to sleep, when she returned to our bedroom, I was scrolling my phone. She tried to touch me. I stopped her and asked her if the 2 reports had come. She said that she had come clean and started touching me again, knowing that it would be our last time. I gave in. That was the most thrilling. Yes, we had been together for a long time. After we were done, I felt so guilty and sad, but also satisfied to be with her. She was the only woman I had been with in the last 6 years. I loved her, and it broke me to the core to think that I was going to push her away from me forever. I also regretted having sex with her because it would have given her hope of reconciliation. She fell asleep in my arms as if she hadn't slept for many nights. I looked at her face and wondered how she could do this to us. I don't know when I dozed off while staring at her pretty face. We woke up when her son knocked on the door. I opened the door for him. He played with us on the bed. It was such a bliss at that moment. I truly felt like retreating from my decision and giving another chance to my marriage, but I suppressed it and went out of bed. It was already evening. I sat in the living room, waiting for my parents and Elias to arrive. After a while, our parents were there. After everyone settled down, Emma called me into the kitchen and asked with an intense eye if I really wanted to do this. I said yes. She then went outside and told everyone that she had something to confess. She told them that she cheated on me at her friend's wedding, but it didn't mean anything. She loved me and could do anything for me. She went on to say that she had confessed about this to me, and I wanted to inform everyone about this. It happened so fast that my parents thought it to be a prank. I said it was not a prank and added that she had confessed when I found the STD test bill in her purse. Her parents looked down in embarrassment and anger. My parents were also disappointed, but they didn't say anything. I told everyone that I also had something to say, and it was that I had filed for divorce. I pulled out the divorce papers and started reading the terms of the divorce. Emma tried to interrupt me, but I continued. I gave her the house in which she and my son could live while I moved out. We both would have joint custody of our son, and I would pay my share of the child support. After reading it, I handed over the papers to her. She gave me a disgusted look and said I tricked her into this. She glanced at the papers and signed it right away. Her parents stood up and left immediately without saying a word. My parents also left, but while leaving, they asked if I wanted to move in with them for some time. I nodded and said yes. Emma went to our son's room and locked it from the inside. Not only did she feel humiliated in front of her parents and in-laws, but she felt defeated that all those confessions and humiliations were for nothing. I packed my remaining stuff and left the house. I wanted to meet my son, but I knew Emma wouldn't let me do so. That was the reason she had locked herself in his room. After that evening, I didn't get any calls or texts from Emma. After 45 days or so, we were presented in the court where our divorce was settled amicably, as none of us contested. We didn't say anything to each other and parted ways. After it was over, it's been more than a week since the divorce was settled. I have been busy throughout, finding a house and settling in there. We may have crossed paths because of our son, but it was going to be only transactional. I still feel empty and frustrated because I know I've also hurt her and humiliated her. Maybe we both got what we deserved. Wow, how generous of her to take the STD test to protect you, and all of that could have been avoided if she had remained loyal. Who does she think she is here, a hero? Absolutely right. How could she do that to you? I'm so sorry you and your son didn't deserve it, but you shouldn't feel bad or frustrated. She humiliated herself the moment she caved and, as you said, opened her legs to another man. She tried to make a fool out of you. She tried to hide it from you. Those are some despicable acts. You've done everything right in the best interest of your son, which is far more than she can say. What do you make of Opie's actions after finding the STD test? Would you have done anything different? Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. I warned my wealthy father that his new wife had a history of scamming people. He called me jealous and gave his fortune to them. Now he's shown up homeless at my door. I'm a 34-year-old guy who grew up all my life without a father. My parents split when I was really young. Mom came from a working-class background while Dad was wealthy. They initially had a happy marriage, but Dad's family didn't approve of him marrying Mom because they thought she wasn't good enough for him, and they made her life quite difficult. When I came into the picture, it seemed my dad's relatives directed their negativity towards me, pushing my mom to a breaking point. She and my dad argued about it, but he brushed it off, thinking she was just overreacting. As things escalated, my mom reached a breaking point, filing for divorce. I was too young to grasp it all, but all I remember is I went from living in a mansion with staff who waited on us to a much smaller apartment in the suburbs with just my mom and me. My grandparents on my mom's side were true lifesavers. Grandma took care of me while Mom began job hunting, and Grandpa kept a close eye on me, walking me to and from school until I could handle it solo. Despite Dad providing child support monthly, he was never interested in being a father. On our scheduled days together, he'd often flake out at the last minute, leaving me waiting. He gradually stopped making an effort to visit me altogether. I still remember my birthdays, eagerly waiting for my dad to join the celebration. Yet he'd either show up late and drunk or not show at all. When I grew older and had a phone of my own, I used to call my dad all the time, but he seldom picked up my calls. My mother, maybe seeing that my dad wasn't being responsible, always tried to be there for me. Oddly, that used to frustrate me even more. I guess as a fiery teenager, I always unfairly blamed my mom for why my dad didn't want to be around. One day, when I was 16 years old, I had a huge fight with my mother and ran away from home. I called my dad hoping that he could pick me up. He didn't, so I decided to just show up at his doorstep, as I knew his address. I kept ringing the doorbell multiple times until my father opened the door and was taken aback seeing me. I smiled and asked him if I could come in, and that's when I noticed a woman standing behind him. She appeared to be wearing my father's shirt, which struck me as odd at first until my dad, instead of welcoming me, stepped out of the house to talk to me. He asked me if everything was okay, and I told him that I fought with my mother, so I needed to spend some time at his place until things cooled down. However, he said he wasn't equipped to take care of a teenager. I stared at him blankly, trying to understand what he meant by that. I reminded him that he was my father. He sheepishly looked at me and told me that this was just bad timing, as he was entertaining his lady friend. He started telling me that I should return home to my mother. When my dad said that to my face, it hurt. It was like my rose-tinted glasses shattered, and I saw things as they were. Coming home in tears, I told my mom, and she hugged me, trying to comfort me. She didn't even care about the fight, which made me feel a bit better about myself. After that, I stopped reaching out to my dad. He only texted on holidays or my birthday, and even then, it was just a one-liner. I quit asking him to hang out or inviting him to school events. The distance just grew from there. I promised myself I'd never let anyone make me feel small again. I wanted to build a life for myself, relying on my resilience and independence. I graduated high school and headed to college with full scholarships. During college, out of the blue, my father called me up one day. It had been years since we had talked, and although I hesitated, I reluctantly answered his call, thinking it might be an emergency. From the tone of his voice, he seemed to be drunk. He happily announced that he was getting married next month. I remained stunned as he went on to say he wanted me to meet the love of his life, as he put it, and her children, who are going to be my step-siblings. Hearing this was like a pang in my chest. Although by this point, I knew that my dad didn't love me, I had always chalked it up to the fact that he didn't like kids. But hearing him talk about the stepkids made me wonder if he just didn't love me specifically. He went on and on about how wonderful the stepkids are, and he can't wait for me to meet them. I politely declined, saying that I was very happy about his marriage, but I didn't want to be involved with his new family. He immediately started begging me, wanting me to be a part of his wedding ceremony. I didn't think this was a good idea at all and did my best to get out of it, but he seemed adamant. When I talked with my mother regarding his marriage, she was as surprised as I was. She didn't expect him to call me after so many years when we had not spoken to each other. She reminded me that I was an adult now, hence I was free to make my own decisions if I wanted to reconnect with him or not. After days of contemplation, I reluctantly agreed to him, hoping this might signal a fresh start for us and that he had genuinely changed. My father invited me for dinner so I could meet his new family before they got married. The dinner was an absolute nightmare to say the least. His fiancée, Kayla, absolutely hated me in every sense. Her stepkids, Brandon and Ursula, weren't keen on me and refused to talk. The dinner was uncomfortable, clearly showing they didn't want me there. My father remained completely oblivious to the fact and rambled on and on about how he is proud to be a dad to 3 kids now and couldn't wait to watch us all bond as a family. It grated on me to hear how he wanted to be part of a family when he couldn't be a family man for me and my mom. He aimed to be a father to his stepkids after years of failing to be one to me. Deciding to let it slide, I kept my mouth shut, wanting to give him the benefit of the doubt that he had truly changed. As we were eating our food, he brought up his will and told me that he had had to change the ownership of his property since he was going to be married now. I nodded, not really into the conversation. Then he dropped the bomb. He invited me tonight to reveal he's transferring his entire fortune and businesses to his stepkids, Brandon and Kayla. I stopped eating, looking at him in surprise. He said he didn't want me to be shocked later, so he's giving me a heads up. I took a deep breath, asking why he was telling me now, given I've never asked for any of his money or businesses. He explained it was Kayla's insistence, so I wouldn't bother her kids later. He continued saying I already had a job, and he didn't think I needed financial help, while Brandon and Kayla, being jobless, needed to learn the ropes of his business for financial success. He thought this would allow them to be financially successful in life. I sat there processing the bombshell he just dropped, trying to keep my composure. I asked him if he understood what this meant to me. He calmly explained that it was a practical decision for the financial future of his new family. I couldn't hold back my frustration and disappointment. I reminded him of the years he wasn't there for me emotionally or financially, and now he was giving everything to his stepchildren. Felt like a slap in the face. My dad seemed surprised by my irritation and asked if giving away his fortune to his stepkids was the cause. I looked him straight in the eyes and clarified that I didn't care about his money covering my life. What I wanted was for him to be a good parent to me. I went on to express that my anger stemmed from him prioritizing his stepkids over me, his own flesh and blood. In response, my father attempted to justify his actions, saying I shouldn't be jealous of Brandon and insisting he treated everyone the same way. But the truth was his words only deepened the wound, emphasizing the stark contrast between how he treated his biological child and his stepchildren. Despite my anger, I decided not to create a scene at the dinner table. I finished my meal in silence, feeling a mix of hurt and resentment. It was clear that I was never a priority in my father's life, and I was left grappling with the realization that his promises of change were nothing more than empty words. After dinner, I thanked him for the dinner and said goodbye to Kayla and her kids. I left the restaurant, and upon reaching my dorm, I immediately blocked him and his entire new family. I was determined to have nothing more to do with them. After that dinner, I stopped thinking about my father and wanted nothing to do with him. Just a few days later, I got a friend request on Facebook from a guy named Michael. Without much thought, I accepted. Then, bam, Michael messaged me with a picture asking if I knew these people. My brows furrowed as I downloaded the picture and saw that it was a picture of my dad with his new family. Confused, I asked where he got it and why he was sending it to me. Michael continued by saying he checked my dad's profile and found old pictures of me with him, and noticing our similar features, he assumed that I was his son. He explained that he knew Brandon and Ursula from school days and wanted to discuss something crucial with my dad. Since my dad never responded, he decided to reach out to me. Intrigued, I asked what the important matter was, and that's when he dropped a bomb. He revealed that both Brandon and Kayla had a history of scamming people, growing up in the same neighborhood. Brandon was notorious for his gambling issues and had garnered a significant debt he couldn't repay. Meanwhile, Kayla had a penchant for stealing cosmetics and dresses from local stores. Their reputation for theft and gambling was well known. So, when one day Kayla suddenly vanished with her kids, it left everyone in their neighborhood shocked. Michael wanted to warn us about them in case we were scammed as well. I asked for proof, and he sent me screenshots of group chat messages where people had discussed Brandon owing them money. He also shared mug shots of Brandon from a past arrest, indicating a troublesome history. Regarding Kayla, since Michael worked as mall security, he had video evidence of her stealing clothes from the stores. The mall's manager, who had already blacklisted her, didn't mind the video going viral to caution others. This got me really concerned because despite not wanting a relationship with my father, I still didn't want him to get hurt. Plus, he had just handed over his entire fortune to them, thinking he would enjoy a good retirement. If these kids were indeed scammers, as Michael warned, his wealth could vanish in no time. I opened up to my mother about this and sought her advice. She was just as shocked as I was. We agreed, and she took the initiative to talk to him, conveying what Michael had shared with me. As expected, my dad didn't take it well and started arguing with my mother. Despite her recounting the entire story, he refused to believe us, suggesting I might be making up the story to get my hands on his wealth. Even when my mom tried showing him the proof Michael sent me, he rejected it, insisting Brandon and Kayla couldn't be involved in such things. My mother is a no-nonsense woman and immediately shut him down. She reminded him that we did our part by giving him a heads up, and now it was up to him to decide what to do. Dad continued to deny any involvement of his beloved stepchildren in scams. He even sent me an email because he was unable to reach me on call and message, as I blocked him, that I had gone too low this time and that he couldn't believe I would try to sabotage his relationship with his stepchildren. I was beyond pissed and decided to let this go. I knew his karma was coming to him. He had left his entire fortune to his stepkids who had a history of scamming, even after I warned him. He blamed me instead of looking into their past, so I had done my part, and there was nothing that I could do anymore. This was the last time I ever heard from my father. Both me and my mother cut him off permanently. Years passed after that incident. My mother eventually got married to a wonderful man named Luke. He's a fantastic partner to her, and I enjoy spending time with him. I graduated college and currently work in a great company. Through the years, I and my mother have heard from our mutual friends that my dad hasn't been doing well as expected. His newfound children were slowly depleting his wealth, and the businesses were accumulating a lot of debt. We never interfered, nor did we bother to check up on him. I had moved into my very own apartment and was enjoying my freedom and independence as an adult. One day, the doorbell rang. Opening it, I was surprised to see my father standing there, a mere shadow of the man he once was. I couldn't believe how different he looked and asked if everything was okay. I asked him what he was doing here. He explained that he was in a fix and had nowhere to go. He had gone to my mother's place, but no one answered her bell. I informed him that my mother was on vacation with her husband. He then told me that he had to reach out to our mutual friends to inquire about my address so he could come and see me instead. He asked me if he could come in for a moment. Torn between compassion and years of resentment, I let him in with the condition that he had 10 minutes to explain himself before I would ask him to leave. The tension hung heavily in the air as I gestured for him to take a seat, suppressing the storm of emotions swirling within me. He nervously confessed that he had lost his entire fortune because of Kayla and Brandon. I didn't even flinch at the news because I knew this was going to happen one day and had warned him years ago. He went on to explain that they had plunged the business into substantial debt, unable to repay their loans. Consequently, the bank seized their family house for repayment. Now they were left homeless, residing in a motel. When he tried to talk to Kayla about her children's actions, she got furious and threatened him with divorce. She told him that her children were just trying to do what they felt was right and that he should not criticize them for it. I was listening to him quietly, but at this point, I couldn't help but interject. I asked him why he was so surprised with what they had done when I had warned him about this very thing. He explained that back then, he didn't want to believe me, thinking I was just jealous of him favoring them. He genuinely believed they were good kids. To my shock, he then started blaming me, that I should have tried to convince him better, and then maybe this mess could have been avoided. I decided that I wanted to teach him a lesson for never taking responsibility for his own stupid mistakes. Determined, I turned on the TV and connected my phone via Bluetooth. I wanted him to witness all the evidence Michael had sent me years ago regarding Brandon and Ursula. My father's eyes widened as he witnessed a cascade of evidence. Screenshots, mugshots, and a video capturing Kayla's theft from the mall. The consequences of his decision to trust these deceitful stepchildren were unfolding before him. The pain, betrayal, and devastation filled the room, echoing the emotions he had unknowingly subjected me to years ago. It was a visual reckoning, a bitter reflection of the choices he had made. Mark sat in stunned silence, confronted by the consequences of his actions. The room carried the unspoken weight of truths, and I seized the moment to deliver my own verdict. "This, Mark, is just the beginning," I declared, my voice steady and resolute. "You lost everything because you refused to believe me and my mother when we told you the truth about them. Your legacy is all gone, and now you must face the reality of your decision." I expressed how all my life I had held on to the belief that he was a good person, only to be consistently disappointed at every turn, and now I'm glad he is getting his karma. He began protesting, suggesting I could have taken the evidence to the police, claiming it could have helped him uncover the truth about them. I shouted back, making it clear that it wasn't my responsibility to report them. I reminded him that my mother had tried to show him proof, but he had stubbornly refused. What more did he expect us to do? I firmly asserted that he had no one to blame but himself for losing his entire fortune. He should have known better. With that, I directed him to the door, firmly asking him to leave my apartment. Stunned, he exited silently. Revenge wasn't about sinking to his level. It was about exposing the extent of his misjudgment and ensuring that the consequences of his misplaced trust echoed in the haunting silence of his conscience. Although I feel great about my decision to finally show him the truth about his stepchildren, I can't seem to forget the betrayal on his face when he finally realized who they were. I'd felt awful for not convincing my dad enough when he handed off his entire fortune to his stepchildren, who have had a history of scamming people. Update 1. I am overwhelmed with everyone's reactions to my post. I just posted a few hours ago, and I already have hundreds of comments. The majority of you seem to agree that I had done all that I could to help my dad avoid this misfortune. To the rest who believe that I could have done better, I just want to clarify that my mother had a very serious conversation with him regarding this, hoping that he would see the truth, but my dad refused to believe us. I didn't want to reach out to him at that time because I was too hurt and wanted to protect my mental health. It was he who took this decision without consulting anyone else. He also never did a background check on Kayla and the kids. With a simple background check, he could have avoided all of this. I don't know if I will ever be ready to have a relationship with my father, or at least at the moment, because he has put me through a lot in the past. I will, however, join therapy as advised by everyone so I can work on my issues. Update 2. Hey, something interesting has happened, so I had to update my story. It's been a few weeks since the incident with my dad, but unexpectedly last night, I received a very drunken call from him in the middle of the night. His words were slurred, and he could hardly speak. Concerned, I inquired if something had happened, but the call abruptly disconnected. Worried for his safety, I made multiple attempts to reach him by calling back. A man finally answered the call and identified himself as the bartender. He informed me that my dad was in no state to walk and asked me to come pick him up. After receiving the bar's location, I immediately drove there. Upon arrival, I found my dad completely soused, repeatedly expressing nonsensical regrets about his actions with my mother and emphasizing that the only person he could depend on was me. Ignoring his comments, I helped him into the car. Uncertain if I should take him in this state to see Kayla at the motel, I asked if he wanted to sleep it off in my apartment. My dad replied that he couldn't go back to her. I asked him what he meant by that, and then he told me that Kayla had left him. I wanted to ask him more, but realized that he wasn't in a position to provide much information, so I drove him back to my home. As I write this, my dad is currently snoring in the next room, and I'm waiting for him to wake up so I can ask him about last night. It was quite unusual for my dad to drink so heavily yesterday. I have informed my mother, who is back from her vacation, and she's on her way to my apartment. She wants to be present when we confront him about what happened last night. Update 3. Basically, after my father woke from his slumber, my mom and I confronted him about the truth. He seemed reluctant to open up about it, so I sternly asked him not to disturb my sleep by calling me again in the middle of the night. He apologized, explaining that the reason he was hesitating to tell us anything was because he was ashamed. He then went on to reveal that Kayla had left him after he had watched all the evidence I had shown him on my TV. He confronted Kayla, who refused to accept her children's mistakes and argued that I was making it all up. When my father threatened to involve the police, she finally confessed. Kayla revealed how her children had always been scammers. She had attempted to reform them, but they stubbornly clung to their ways. She had relocated from her town to this big city in an attempt to start a new life where no one knew them. When she met my father, she saw financial stability and hoped her children would change eventually. However, they persisted in their reckless lifestyle, accumulating more debt. She confessed that she knew about it all along but had never imagined that they would end up with nothing. They fought even more, and Kayla confessed that now that my father had nothing to offer, she had been contemplating leaving him. She packed her bags and left. My father was almost in tears as he recounted the incident. While I felt sympathy for him, I couldn't help but reflect on how he had dug his own grave by trusting a woman over me. If only he had listened to me, he would still have his family mansion and businesses. My father then began apologizing profusely. Cheerfully, he asked my mother for forgiveness, acknowledging the pain he had caused her. He admitted that he should have never let her go. Turning to me, he asked if I could find it in myself to forgive him. We remained silent, and my father expressed his commitment to spending the rest of his life trying to make amends with me. Kayla and my father are awaiting discussions with their lawyers to file for divorce. I hope my father takes legal action against her and her children for everything he has lost. It's likely to be a challenging legal battle, as they might not easily admit their mistakes. However, with the evidence I gave him and the information my father will gather from his business operations about their mismanagement of company funds, he might have enough to hold them accountable. It remains to be seen what happens with his divorce. For now, I hope he learns to live with his mistakes every day and realizes just what he missed out on when he left my mother and me in the past. I hope he realizes his mistakes and grows into a better man over time. As for me, I will keep my head up and try to be the best version of myself, just like my mother taught me to be. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I accidentally caused a war between my family and my brother's wife's family with one text message. So, my brother's wedding happened 2 days ago, and it turned into complete chaos, which I know even though I don't were there. You might wonder why I didn't attend the wedding if it's my brother's. Well, it's because of his wife's family. He did send me an invitation to the wedding because he wanted me there, but his fiancée told him I couldn't attend because I had a boyfriend. You might be confused, but I'm a man, a bisexual man to be exact, and I have a boyfriend who I wanted to bring to the wedding. She said, even though she doesn't have a problem with that and he doesn't have a problem with that, her extremely religious parents, who already forced her to do the wedding in a church, would most likely banish us from the wedding and cause trouble between our families. After she told him that, my brother told me I couldn't attend and told me why. You might think I was angry. The truth is I was relieved. I hate going to big events with lots of people because of my social anxiety, and I already was used to not being able to attend certain events because of my sexuality, so it was nothing I haven't heard before. So, at the day of the wedding, I stayed at home with my boyfriend. It's worth mentioning my parents apparently didn't know I wasn't attending the wedding. I was chilling at home cuddling with my boyfriend when I suddenly got a text message from my parents asking me where I was because they couldn't find me at the wedding party. I told them I wasn't attending the wedding and if my brother hasn't told them anything. They said no and asked me what happened. I didn't see any reason to lie, so I sent them a text message telling them exactly why. Now, I have to admit I don't exactly know what happened after I sent them this message because they read it but didn't reply. And why do they care in the first place? They didn't notice I wasn't there before until the wedding was already over. They only noticed when the wedding party started. However, apparently my parents talked to my brother about it, and all of a sudden my absence was the main topic of the wedding party. From what I heard, 2 fronts formed. On the one hand, my parents and the rest of my family against the family of my brother's wife. And apparently he, as a husband now, felt compelled to take her side and tried to argue in her favor. It's crazy to think that I was just sitting at home living my best life with my boyfriend while all of that went down on his wedding. The wedding party was ruined, and my brother appeared on my door angrily screaming at me why I felt the need to ruin his wedding. I was confused and asked him what happened, and he told me everything. I told him it wasn't my intention. I just told our parents what happened because they didn't know and wanted to know where I was, and I thought he told them beforehand. He screamed at me that I ruined his wedding. I told him it's not my fault. He wasn't honest with them. I just respected their wish to not attend the wedding. I couldn't know it would go down like this because, like I said, I couldn't attend several events before because of my sexuality, and my parents never said anything about it, so I thought it would be the same thing here. But I got to admit it's kind of sweet that my parents and the rest of my family stood up for me. They haven't done it before. That's a more than welcome change, but I still feel kind of bad because apparently I really ruined the wedding party. Update 1. Didn't think I'd give an update, but many interesting things happened. So, after my brother's visit, his wife and him went to honeymoon, and the way the wedding party went might have been even worse than I imagined. What happens now is incredible. When I said in the main post that 2 fronts had formed, I only meant that metaphorically, of course, but it's no longer that. While nothing much interesting happened in the first 2 days afterwards, the terror started as soon as my brother and his wife went on their honeymoon. My mom and my dad visited me and told me how the wedding party escalated, and they were so close to physical violence. I thought it was funny at first, but this truly bothers me. I also want to point out that you did a great job at convincing me it's not my fault, but hearing my parents' side still gave me a bad feeling in my stomach. However, like I said, the terror started shortly after they went to their honeymoon, and when I say terror, I mean that my brother's wife's family found both my Facebook and Instagram account and started spamming me with hateful messages. I received insults and hateful messages from various different accounts who all had one thing in common. They all had somewhat of a Christian theme, and all of them had the same last name, so it wasn't hard to find out whose accounts it was. Mainly because I don't know my brother's wife's family at all. I only know her, and I know her parents were homophobic Christians, but whatever. They not only started attacking me, they also found the account of my boyfriend over my account because we're linked as a couple and started to send him the same messages. The messages contained, on one side, typical bigot stuff like, "You're burning in hell for your sins." One even called me and my boyfriend two devils in disguise. The other side were just blatant insults. You get the idea. I called my parents and told them what they are doing. Then, I sent a text message to my brother with screenshots of the messages his wife's family sent me, to which he replied that I shouldn't disturb him with that during his honeymoon, as I already destroyed his wedding party. Couldn't believe it. He was just like them. He did send me an apology after my mom told me she called him. But none of this is the main reason I'm giving you this update this early, because I got a call this morning from an unknown number. I hesitated because I thought it was one of them, and I was right, but it was none of the people who insulted me. I heard a woman's voice who introduced herself as the half-sister of my brother's wife. She said it didn't go unnoticed what her family was doing, and she wanted to apologize for them. I told her I'm not going to tell anyone in her family about this and that I don't blame her for her family's actions. She thanked me and hung up. I don't know why, but I have this feeling she only did this to protect her family from being reported. My mother wrote to me earlier that she wants to report the insults and the harassment of these people, and that she demands for my brother to divorce his wife or she will disinherit him from her will because that's not how she raised him. A little radical in my opinion, but I understand where she's coming from. This entire thing escalated so much, it's unbelievable. Thank you all for your support on my first post. Update 2. Some of you were wondering why I seem so calm and casual in the update when I'm discriminated against. The truth is that I am in a relationship with my boyfriend for 3 years now, and the things that happen now are nothing compared to what I've been through. I receive hateful messages almost daily, not only from their accounts but in general, and I learned to ignore that. There have been way worse situations, such as when my boyfriend went to visit his family, and I couldn't go with him. We kissed each other goodbye on the train station, and when the train left and no one saw it, a group of guys attacked me. I was sent to the hospital because of severe injuries. Just to give you an idea what I had to deal with in the past. And don't get me wrong, we will report my brother's wife's family, but what they are doing is nothing I haven't seen 1,000 times before. Update 3. It's been a few days. First of all, me and my boyfriend are fine. Luckily for us, they didn't go any further than their text messages. My mom filed a report against them. I don't know the current situation about that as I haven't filed the report myself. The reason I update you is a different one. First of all, one person in my brother's wife's family is actually going to testify in my favor and against her family. It really takes courage to do so. It's the same person that called me in the last update. Somehow, they found out that she is into women. No reason to hide it anymore. However, she said she's fine and is going to stay at a friend's house. I have so much respect for what she does. Imagine the strength you need to testify against your own family. I now feel bad for assuming she only called me to save her family from being reported. More importantly, what is the current situation with my brother? Well, my mom talked to him and told him to leave his wife or she will disinherit him from her will. He decided to stay with his wife, and my mom made her threat come true. He's no longer in her will. My father did the same. When I visited them, I also told them that I wish that this entire situation went different. They assured me it's not my fault, but I feel like if it wasn't for me, then my family wouldn't be ripped apart like this. Haven't talked to my brother since then. My boyfriend feels familiar. He also told me he kind of feels responsible for all this chaos. I assured him it's not his fault, but honestly, I wasn't even sure if I could say this in my position. On the other hand, it was my brother's wife's family's bigotry that ruined everything, and everything would have been fine if I could have just attended. But now it's time for me to grow distant to this situation. We see what the report will do. I followed your advice to document everything. The insulting and harassing messages continued until 2 days ago, so I have much to say about them. Unfortunately, homophobia is still very much normalized in our society. I already said it in a post in my profile, but the reason I'm so calm and casual about the situation is the simple fact that I'm used to situations like this. They don't get to me anymore. If I let any insult get to me, I wouldn't make it for a long time. It's a coping mechanism. I've been into situations where I was sent into the hospital because I kissed my boyfriend in public, so insults and harassment like theirs is nothing I haven't seen before. I want to say thank you for all your support on my first 2 posts. Update 4. I think some of y'all are waiting for an update, so here I am. Keep in mind that this update will probably be the last one. So, last time I told you my mother was pressing charges against them, and to my surprise, we won. They weren't going to jail or anything, but they had to pay for their actions, literally. There was one incident where my brother's wife's dad was actually trying to find out where I lived and asked my brother, who told him. Only God knows what he would have done to us if we still had lived there. But in the time span of the last 2 months, me and my boyfriend moved to a different place which my brother didn't know anything of. Also, their social media accounts were deleted. However, I don't know if this was part of their punishment or if they did it themselves. My mom has also carried out the threat towards my brother and disinherited him from her will. After he came back from his honeymoon, he begged her to put him in again. She said only if he apologized to me. She invited me and my boyfriend over, and my brother sat in the living room with this mad look on his face. She made him apologize, but I didn't accept this apology because I could tell it wasn't sincere. He did it because he had to and not because he was actually sorry. I told my brother that I am disappointed in him for who he became. Before that, we had this huge bond. Usually, we never judged each other for stuff like this, and all of a sudden, he has such a problem with me having a boyfriend. I just don't get it. I told him that I missed the old him. He didn't respond to anything. He just sat there quietly staring at the bottom. After I finished, he just got up and left. This was the last time I spoke with him, and it's already been a few weeks since this happened. My parents paid much more attention to the discrimination I faced since this incident. They wanted to learn more about the problems I face as a queer person. I really love them. My dad even got a bisexual pride flag for me and asked if he could hang it in our bedroom. I love that I have such great parents. I just wished for my brother to become the person he once was. By the way, since the case with my brother's wife's family is over, I didn't hear anything about their lesbian daughter. She supported us during the process, but we lost contact afterwards, and I just hope she's fine. Update 5. The final update of my story happened 6 months ago, and I figured some of you might be interested in how things are currently doing. So I'm back, at least for this post. Right now, there have been some things that happened. First of all, I want to give you an update about the sister of my brother's wife. Around 2 months after my update, she texted us and asked if she could come over. We talked a while, and I was relieved to find out that she is fine. She said that she moved in with her girlfriend when the case was over, simply because her parents and the rest of her family had disowned her and threatened her with physical violence if she dares to return. However, the relationship with her girlfriend ended after a while, and she asked us if she could stay for a few days until she found something. She stayed with us for 2 weeks. During that time, my parents had visited us and offered her to stay with them because they had a big house with some free space. She stays there currently because she wanted to study, and my parents had no problem with letting her stay a little longer. Me and my boyfriend also support her financially a little bit. We included her into several different celebrations, such as Christmas and New Year's Eve, and I feel like she is like the sister I never had. What's probably more interesting for you is how my brother is currently doing. The truth is I don't know exactly. We haven't talked since the apology. However, he actually tried to attend our Christmas celebration party. But the moment he appeared, my dad kicked him out and said that, and I quote, "This homophobic rubbish is no longer allowed in my house. I love him." Oh, by the way, of course, both went through with disowning him. My boyfriend and I are still together, and I feel like he might be the one I want to marry. This entire situation made our bond so much stronger. I plan on proposing to him, but there are so many ideas floating around in my head for the proposal that I can't really decide which one. Also, the social media accounts of my brother's wife's family had disappeared entirely, all of them, but I assume they already made new ones under a new name. I'm just glad all of this is finally over. I don't have any compassion left for my brother. I just wish he had never developed this way. Everything that happened to him, he brought it on himself. If you guys want, I can update you when I'm engaged. Thanks for reading. Wish you all the best. Update 6. Do you remember when I told you in my last update 2 months ago that I will propose to my boyfriend? Well, I did it today. I brought up so many ideas that it was really hard to decide, so I gave him some subtle hints, not too obvious, just enough to see how he reacts and then decide based on his reaction. In the end, I made a photo album of us featuring the most important events in our relationship. Each of them had a thought of mine in a caption below them. Some of them were meaningful, but some of them were just random, like one photo of us eating at his favorite restaurant at his birthday, and the caption just says something like, "Damn, that pizza was good." That made him laugh. We walked to his favorite spot in town, which is a wonderful lake. That is where I gave him the album and told him it's a present and to look through it. He was focused and didn't notice what I was doing behind him, as I just told him I was getting something I forgot. I positioned myself behind him, and that is when the last page came into play. That page had a photo of me holding the ring in the same way I positioned myself behind him, looking straight at the camera, and the caption says, "Hopefully he says yes." He turned around in disbelief and started crying almost immediately when he saw me. I couldn't even finish the question, and he already said yes. It was exactly how I hoped it would go. I always dreamt of making my proposal like out of a romance novel, and I was successful. So yeah, that's it. I'm going to marry him. I already told my entire family except for my brother, of course. They were so happy about it, especially my mom and new sister. They shrieked out of excitement on the phone. I assume my brother knows anyway, considering I shared it on Facebook. You guys probably aren't wrong that he might plan something, but if he does, it won't stop us. Do you guys want me to update you when I'm married to tell you about the wedding and everything? Update 7. I just have to tell you guys this. We're currently planning our wedding, and instead of a regular wedding dance, we decided we want to have a lightsaber battle against each other. Of course, it's not just a random lightsaber battle. It's like a choreography that we have to learn. We're both huge Star Wars fans. My dad, who also loves Star Wars, said he wants to join, and he had an idea how to do that. He said to add like a story to it that he wants to have a lightsaber battle against my fiancé, where my fiancé has to fight for the right to marry me, where my dad would eventually lose, and then I would step in to test my fiancé's strength myself, and there would be a lightsaber battle between us, and then I'd acknowledge his force as worthy enough. I know some might think it's childish, but I'm so excited for it. Our wedding will be a day for people to remember. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My girlfriend's daughter falsely accused me of assaulting her. Now that I'm proven innocent, my girlfriend wants to reconcile, but I'm not sure I want to. We've been going out for the best part of 2 years. It was going amazingly well, and because of lockdown, we moved in together. She has just one daughter, and I always thought we got along well. Last week, I got home from work and noticed she and her daughter weren't in. I didn't really think it was strange, but I was then contacted by the police asking me to go in and see them, which I did. Basically, her daughter accused me of assaulting her. I didn't, of course. I absolutely denied it, and the police asked me permission to search my house, which I did. They examined the daughter, didn't find anything, and she basically was interviewed and admitted she made it up. She admitted her dad, who's a real wrong-un, was telling her she needed to say that so it could get me out of the picture and he might be able to be back in her life. He's not been in it for a while and hasn't long started to make contact and spend time with her, and we've noticed she's changed a bit lately, acting out, being disrespectful, that sort of thing. If I ask her to do something, it's "you're not my effing dad," etc. Naturally, I'm relieved, but I'm angry, upset, and just really confused. My girlfriend made contact saying she wanted to move back in, and we looked into picking up where we left off. I told her no way because I can't trust her daughter yet and don't really want to be around her. And I'm not sure I want her living under my roof. She said she's only a kid and I shouldn't hold it against her, and I was being manipulated. I know that's true, but I can't look past how horrible it was. She also says that as a mom, she did what she had to do, and as horrible as it was, she'd do it again in a heartbeat. So I can't say she apologizes. I mean, I get that, but it doesn't make anything easier, and I can't apologize for how I feel, too. So here I am. I don't know what to do. She's staying with her mom until we can talk, but I genuinely don't know how it'll go. Do I take her back and move on? Or shall I cut my losses? Edit. It's bad enough for what happened. What's making it feel worse is that I feel like she should be a bit more empathetic and apologize at least for what happened and what the kid did. But she's not doing that. Edit 2. Jesus Christ, I'm not a police apologist or anything, But what is it with people in this thread and the police? They did a great job. They investigated properly. My name is cleared, and I have no further involvement with them. I just don't understand why people have a problem with me stating the facts or even not being negative about them in the comments. Dubious people, please move on. This child needs her mom's full attention, and you need to protect yourself. I do, however, feel your ex did the right thing. Her daughter had no history of lying and did not show any hatred towards you. So of course, she believed her and took steps to make sure she was safe. Heck, even if she hated your guts, she should make sure the kid is safe when such allegations are made. It's her job as a mom to put her kid first. I would have done the same without a second thought. Oh, I do agree that she should have done it and done the right thing. No arguments there, but it's her lack of compassion and empathy for what I've been through. As others have said, if she hadn't admitted to making it up, it could have been very bad for me, and all it would have taken was for someone to get wind of it and leak it on social media, and I'd be harassed or worse. Comment: I don't think it's a good idea to continue. Yes, the girl was manipulated by her dad. But if it happened once, why shouldn't it happen again? Yes, as a mom, your girlfriend did right by her daughter. However, would you be able to even consider letting her and the girl move back in knowing that you are in constant danger of being accused again? Sorry, but I think you should move on and let them sort out the mess with the dad alone. OP. I just don't trust her daughter anymore, and if you can't trust someone under your own roof, there's not much chance of building that back up. Update. I broke up with her. Thank you all honestly for all the advice and reassurance. I honestly already knew that I wanted to finish it long before my last post, but I just needed others to write it out to verify it in my own mind. A few people said, "Why is this even a question?" Well, in all honesty, it was mainly because I'm not the most confident of guys. You see, even though I'm told I'm a great guy and a good catch, I don't have a lot of confidence with women. I've only ever been in 3 serious relationships, and I've only been actively dating with 7 women, including her. She couldn't believe it when I told her I'd been single for a while before I met her. So I was genuinely weighing up whether I should stay with her, as I might not meet anyone else for a while and might not be able to do better, as sad as that sounds. Plus, I was worried if I do meet someone else, how do I explain how my last relationship ended? Oh yeah, me and my ex didn't work out because her 13-year-old daughter accused me of fingering her, and I didn't ever want to see her again, but she later admitted it was false and her dad put her up to it, and the police cleared me. I'm totally innocent, honest. So I suppose looking at myself, I've got a lot to work on before I consider dating again. So to elaborate on the breakup, but keep it salient, I told her to come over last night. I said to her, I agree what she did was right by her daughter, and I would do the same if I had a child who told me that. But I think she's out of order for not apologizing for what I've been through or showing me any empathy. I said, I can't trust her daughter anymore and don't want to be around her or have her in my life. So that's it. I'm finishing with her. I also said, there's too much drama. I don't want her ex to interfere in my life. I didn't sign up for that. She started really crying, saying she's so sorry, etc. But I told her it's too late. She should have done that as soon as she knew I was innocent. I told her to go back to her mom's and think about how she wants to get her and her daughter's stuff back and call me in a few days when she's decided. More tears, but she then asked after a while if it would make any difference if her daughter apologized. I said, No, I never want to talk to her again. I'm especially done with her. And I explained why. Not only am I so angry with her, I can't trust her, and what she did makes me angry for another reason, too. Basically, I was assaulted as a child by an older male family member when I was 7. It messed me up for a long time. So to have someone lie about something so disgusting fills me with a lot of rage. She had no idea. I never told her about our relationship at all. If she knew, she would definitely have apologized. I got so annoyed about that. Like, why does knowing what I went through make me more worthy of empathy? Does not ruining your boyfriend's life make me less of an apology? I went off on a rant about that. I was so pissed off. So after I had my rant about it, I told her to leave, and we talk in a few days about when to start collecting her stuff. I feel mixed, justified in ending it, but sad it's over. We were amazing up until this. We really started to bond as a team. There were lots of good moments. My dog's missing them too. He sat by the door crying after she left. Edit. Just to get this out of the way, let's stop with this, you let the father win or he's won talk. He's not really won anything. He's alienated his daughter. His ex hates him. And the police are looking for him. Not only that, if he happens to cause me or my family any more trouble or bother us again, it'll end up very badly for him. He may have won the battle, but he certainly lost the war. TLDR. Told her to come over, said we're done, explained why, and we'll talk soon to arrange for her to get their stuff. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My wife harassed me for caring for my dying father instead of her. Now that he's passed away, she's demanding half my inheritance, even sending her family to threaten me. I, 38M, have always been pretty close to my father, which has always driven my wife crazy, especially since for the past year or so, my dad has been extremely ill. He's been dealing with renal disease and congestive heart failure, and since I am his only son, I'm the one who is taking care of him. I make sure to drive him to the clinic 3 times a week so he can do his dialysis, which is what is keeping him alive since he doesn't have a match for a kidney donor. I was tested and I wasn't a match. I begged my closest family members to go and see if they were a match. However, most of them were reluctant about having one of their kidneys cut out of them and given to someone else, mostly because what if when they are older and they need a new kidney? If they gave away one of theirs when they were younger, then that's what could be the difference between them living and dying. I guess I understood where they were coming from, but if it was me that was a match, I wouldn't in no way hesitate to give my father one of mine to save his life. There are a lot of people who donate their kidneys and live just fine on the one kidney they have left, but no matter how hard I tried to convince my close family members, they only just refused to go through with it. It was rather frustrating that these people could be the one person who could keep a sick man from dying way too soon by simply donating a good kidney to save his life, but the worst part about all of it was my wife, Maria, 32F. It didn't matter how sick my dad was or how close he was to being on his deathbed. She always had something selfish and rude to say about me going and helping my dying father every day. She couldn't figure out why I would put aside my other responsibilities, such as catering to her every need, if that's even such a thing. But if I didn't pay attention to her every waking problem or what she had to say, I was in for a rude awakening. If she wasn't putting me down for not noticing her new hairstyle or the fact that she rearranged the dining room for the 100th time every day, when I walked into my front door, she was there leaning against the hallway wall just waiting to tear me a new one. And not only that, but she was ready to go to war about where I had been and why I'd been gone so long. And of course, my answer was always the same. I was driving my father to the clinic to get his treatments done, and then I drove him back home and helped his nurses get him situated. It has gotten so bad that I don't even feel like I can stop and sit down and just converse with my dad before I have to rush home to be interrogated. This afternoon, when I walked into the house, my wife was already in a hell of a mood. As soon as I got through the door and hung up my jacket, she was instantly by my side asking me why we don't have a new car or a new upcoming business plan to obtain more wealth and be people who are important. What you may not realize is that my father is a very wealthy man. And no, I have never asked him for a dime since I was old enough to work on my own and take care of myself. This means yes, I have struggled greatly and still do to this day, but what my wife doesn't know, well, at least not yet anyway, is that I took out a pretty substantial loan just to help us get by with a house payment, property taxes, insurance, and utilities. I haven't told her because I know she will weasel her way into getting a hold of as much of the money from the loan as possible and blow it on anything and everything to make herself look like she has money, even though she is broke. When I came in the door and went to the kitchen to sit down to go through the bills, Maria followed behind me, and before I knew it, she slammed a piece of paper down in front of me and said, "So when were you going to tell me you took out a huge loan that I could be used for something I need? Or were you just going to hide it from me until it was already gone?" She looked at me and then rolled her eyes as she sat down in the chair next to me. "Well, what do you have to say?" she said, clearly angry at me for keeping this money from her. I took a deep breath and then I told her that I didn't tell her about the loan because I specifically got the loan to pay the overdue bills we have that we have been behind on for the past 5 months. I said, "Do you enjoy having a house to live in?" She was about to protest, but I stopped her and kept going. "What about the car you drive or the water you bathe in, or the electricity that lights up your house at night time? And what about all of the other expensive crap you think you have to have too? I don't know, survive." I stood up and walked into the other room, and she, of course, came stomping after me, yelling that since we were married, half of the money was hers, and I had to inform her that she wasn't there when I signed for the loan, so technically the loan is in my name, not hers. I said to her that, "And you have no means of paying a single penny back against this loan. What on earth makes you think I would give you a single dime of it so you can waste it on absolutely nothing? I would like to be able to keep my home and my car, and I need to be able to take off work for a while to help take care of my dad. He's being placed in hospice care this week because every time they put him through dialysis, his heart rate decreases, and his doctors aren't sure how much longer he will be able to handle the treatments. So if you don't mind, I'm going to be very busy doing what a man who loves his father would do, and a man who needs to have a home to come back to once everything is said and done." Maria rolled her eyes at me and told me that I was wasting my time worrying about that old man, aka my father. She told me that he was so wealthy yet he couldn't even support his broke son who can barely make ends meet. I told her that if she didn't like, she could find a new man to mooch off of and boss around because I had had enough of her arrogant attitude towards me taking care of my father. She stopped complaining for a minute, and then her behavior changed all of a sudden. She walked up to me and rubbed her hand across my shoulders and whispered, "You know you could always ask your dad to help you while you're struggling. He's almost dead anyway. What else could he possibly do with all of that money he has saved? He can't take it with him when he dies." I was stunned by her selfish, money-hungry, gold-digging way of thinking. I walked past her into our bedroom and grabbed her prized possessions, which happened to be a pair of suitcases from one of those top designers. I honestly don't even know how to pronounce their names, but I laid them out on the bed, and I ushered my wife into the bedroom and pointed at the suitcases and asked her which one she was going to place her favorite dresses in, and which one was going to hold her only excuse for a collection of bells she had collected from all over the world with her somewhat rich family. She had to think about what I was suggesting before it finally sunk in. "You're kicking me out?" She squeaked so loud the next-door neighbor's dog started barking. I told her I was done with her attitude and her bossy way of trying to control every aspect of my life. I told her she wouldn't get much in the divorce, but she could expect to hear from my lawyer within a few weeks. But until then, she needed to start packing. Maria called her family, who all showed up at my house, where they all started going through everything in my home. It didn't matter if it was clearly not Maria's, as they were going through everything. They tore apart my home from top to bottom. By the time all of Maria's stuff was packed and placed in the moving truck, Maria's father, Carlos, 54M, found me in the kitchen trying to put all of my dishes and pots and pans back into my cabinets. Carlos cornered me in front of the sink. He was so close to me that I could smell the garlic on his breath from the Italian food they had all ordered while at my home to pack up Maria's belongings. Carlos stared me in the eyes for a good 35 seconds before he told me that I was making a big mistake. He told me that his family didn't believe in divorce and that what I have done to his daughter was unforgivable. I tried to explain to him that his daughter didn't value family the way I did, and I asked Carlos if he was sick and dying. Wouldn't he expect his only child, if he only had one offspring, to help to take care of him in his time of need? Carlos paused and thought about what he was about to say. He clicked his tongue and told me that he would expect his daughter to help him, not his son, because women were put here to help with medical situations, not men. I wasn't surprised by his answer because, after all, they were a Latin family, and they do things much differently than my Caucasian family would. I told him I was sick of his daughter always making me feel like I was doing something terrible by helping my sick and dying father in his last days. I couldn't sit by and continue to let her treat me like a criminal for doing what was right in the first place. Carlos leaned in close to me and whispered in my ear, "We will never forget what you have done to our sweet Maria. You will remember this family." I pulled away from him and told him to get him and the rest of his family out of my house. After they left, I went back to my normal routine of picking up my father and taking him to the clinic for dialysis and treatment, and afterward I would take him home and spend as much time with him as possible. This whole time, my two children have been in the background witnessing their mother treat me awfully and question me for taking care of my sick dad. I had to keep explaining to them that their mother didn't value the time that's spent with loved ones, especially if it couldn't benefit her in some way. And no, this isn't the first time I've had to explain to my children why their mother acts the way she acts. She has learned some pretty unruly behavior from her entire family over the course of her life growing up, and I wasn't aware of this side of her until after we had already had 2 children and been married. It was like once she knew I had been trapped, She could finally be who she really is and force me to either live with it or move on to live my own life without her overwhelming selfish tendencies. Update. It's been a week since I filed for a divorce against my wife, and she has stubbornly refused to sign the paperwork. However, I was able to trick her into signing the paperwork by promising her that I would pay alimony. What she doesn't know is that the alimony won't be very much, but it got the job done. And of course, after about 2 months of her getting payments, she realized that she was getting practically nothing, but that's the least of my worries. My father has been placed in hospice recently, and it's not looking good. I just got done visiting him, and I've been praying nonstop that he will pull through, but I know he's probably not going to. I decided to go to bed early that night, and in the middle of the night around 3 a.m., I received a phone call. It was from the overnight doctor that usually checks on my dad. He called to tell me that my dad had passed away in his sleep. I was devastated. I wasn't with him when he passed. He was all alone, and that breaks my heart. I couldn't even come close to falling back to sleep that night, and the next morning when I got up, there was a knock on my door. I put my robe on and reluctantly answered it. It was a man in a really nice suit with a briefcase in his right hand. I asked him what he needed, and he told me he was my father's lawyer and a good friend of his, and that he was here to help me with my father's funeral and discuss my father's will. I let him in, and we sat down at the kitchen table, and he laid out some paperwork for me to sign. I asked him if my father had put anyone else in his will, and his lawyer told me that I was the only beneficiary and that everything that my father owned was now mine, which included his vast wealth. I was taken aback by this information. I mean, I knew that my dad was rich and I was his only son, but I hadn't even considered that I would be the one to inherit all of his money. But when I really thought about it, no one else in the family ever visited him the whole time he was sick, so it made perfect sense that he would leave it to me. So I went from being in a large amount of debt to a millionaire in as little as 6 hours. I immediately thought about my ex-wife and what she would do if she found out about this. But I just ignored my gut feelings and signed the paperwork, and the lawyer left. I knew I had to start planning my father's funeral, but before I could even start looking for a funeral home, there was another knock on my door. And when I looked through the front window and saw my ex-wife standing there, my stomach sank. How could she possibly already know about everything that had just happened? I sighed and opened the door. She pushed her way inside and got straight to business. She went and sat on the sofa and crossed her legs and her arms over her chest. I looked at her and said, "So what do I owe this pleasure of seeing you so early this morning?" She rolled her eyes and said, "I know your dad just passed away, and I also know you inherited all of his money. Half of the money belongs to me, and you're going to give it to me, or you're going to regret ever meeting me." I couldn't help but laugh out loud at the absurd statement she just made. I told her she was out of her mind if she thinks she was getting a single dime of the money I just inherited. I told her that I didn't have that money when we divorced, so she has absolutely no right to any of it. Her face turned so red I thought she was going to start melting. She stood up and rushed towards me, and I put my hands up and said, "Don't even think about putting your hands on me." She took a step back and told me that this wouldn't be the last I hear about this, and I knew exactly what that meant. Her family was going to be harassing me until I gave in to her demands, and that wasn't going to happen. I told her she needed to get the hell out of my house, and with that, she left. But before she left, she asked me if she could talk to the kids, and I told her that they were sleeping and they don't know about their grandfather passing away yet, and I wasn't going to let her be the one to tell them. And then she hit me with, "I'm taking you to court to get custody of both of them. You don't deserve to be their legal guardian." I told her how she plans on taking care of them. She has no money to even afford a place of her own. Here, they have their own rooms, and I have all the money in the world to take care of them. So go ahead and try, Maria. You will lose, and you will look like a fool. Update. It's been about a month since Maria showed up at my home. I was able to lay my dad to rest in one of the best cemeteries in town, and yesterday, I went out to the cemetery to place new flowers on his grave. But when I got there, his tombstone had been completely destroyed. Chunks of stone were laying all over his resting place, and on the ground was a placard. I bent down and read what it said, and I was shocked by what I read. It read, "The money belongs to her until you give what's rightfully hers." Expect to keep having to buy a new tombstone for your father's grave. Sincerely, the family. I kicked the placard so hard it burst into 1,000 little pieces. How could anyone defile someone's grave like this? I made sure I phoned the police and reported the foul play. They told me they would keep an eye on the cemetery at night to see if they can catch them in the act. I immediately went and ordered a new tombstone to replace the broken one. I was furious yet not surprised. Maria's family was insane. They always have been, and I knew this wasn't going to be the only run-in with them I would have. I cleaned the tombstone up the best I could and then contacted the right people to have it replaced. I messaged my ex-wife, Maria, and told her she was really immature, defiling a man's grave who just passed away over money that did not belong to her. And of course, she played dumb like she didn't know what I was talking about, even though the note clearly indicated that the reason the tombstone was ruined was that I hadn't given Maria half of my inheritance. And there was no way in hell that I was going to give in and give it to her. I don't care what they do to me or to my dad's grave. He would never forgive me if I gave in to her demands and gave her his hard-earned money. I tried to put it out of my mind and relax once I got home. I planned on ordering a pizza for the night and watching a movie with my kids, but my son decided he was going to go to the races with a couple of his friends, and my daughter asked me if she could spend the night at her friend Jessica's. Of course, I gave in and let them go and have fun. There's no reason in making them sit around with me and sulk over the day's events. And boy, was I glad I'd let them leave for the night, because the next thing I know, a brick of some kind came flying through my living room window, and before I could get up to investigate, there was another brick thrown through the window on the side of the house, which is just what I need, since the next plan I had was to rent out my house and move the kids and myself into my dad's house. I took off outside to try and catch a glimpse of who was vandalizing my home, and no surprise, it was Maria's brother, Jair, 39M. I could clearly see his long black hair flowing through the wind as he sprinted away from my house and then got into what was clearly his black Kia. I shook my head in disbelief. You'd think they would try a little bit harder at concealing themselves if they are going to commit crimes. I walked back inside and picked up one of the bricks, and on the back of one of them was a piece of paper that was taped to the brick. It read, "The money or else." I rolled my eyes and tossed it out on the patio. I grabbed my phone and called the police and made a police report about the incident. A police officer came by and took a look at the damage in the bricks, especially the one with the message, and of course I had to explain to him about my ex-wife and her family being obsessed with me giving her half of my inheritance and the fact that they are doing things to intimidate me into giving her the money. I told the officer that this probably won't be the last time I have to call the police because of them, and of course I was right about that. Update. Hello guys. I apologize for leaving the update in the middle, but here is another one for you. So ever since the brick throwing episode, I've since fixed the broken windows and began moving everything into my father's house. The kids are pretty excited about moving into their grandfather's house, mainly because the bedrooms are huge, and they'll both have their own bathroom soon. I'll have new tenants living in our old house that I'm going to be renting too. Maria and her family have no clue that we are moving. I would like to keep it that way, but my luck will find out somehow and continue to make me miserable. And of course, just by saying such things, I jinxed myself, because after we got everything moved into my dad's house, I ended up getting an unwanted visitor at around 3 a.m. one morning. I happened to wake up in the middle of the night and was thirsty, so I went downstairs to go get a drink of water. The kids were sound asleep upstairs, thank God. When I walked into the kitchen, there was a man standing in the doorway with a baseball bat, and before I could realize what I was seeing, he was charging at me and hit me right in the side, which knocked the air clean out of me. I stumbled to the side and looked up, and the moonlight coming into the windows in the kitchen was just enough light to illuminate the culprit's face, and I recognized him immediately. It was Maria's older brother, Jerome, 42M. Before he could take another swing, I ducked and charged him, ramming him into the cabinets and knocking down all sorts of canned goods to the floor. All I could think about was the kids waking up and coming downstairs. I hurried up and put Jerome in a headlock and told him I would put him to sleep if he didn't take his baseball bat and get the hell out of my house. I told him if he ever came back, I would make sure he could never walk again. And with that, I let him go and shoved him out the back door before closing and locking it behind him. I had to catch my breath for a minute after being knocked in the side so hard. I hadn't really thought about one of them breaking into my house in the middle of the night to attack me, but I guess I should be ready for just about anything at this point. I called the same police officer I dealt with about the brick incident, and he came by and took my statement. He told me to make sure I put up some security cameras in case something like this happened again. I told him he was lucky my kids didn't wake up and come downstairs because I probably would have done a whole lot more damage than I would have wanted to because no one messes with my kids. I don't care who it is. The police officer took my statement and then left, and once again, I had a hard time falling asleep that night. What's funny is what happened next because Maria's brother knew we had moved to my dad's new house. But Maria was nothing but clueless. I guess I'll start where I left off. Maria had no clue we had moved out of my house to my dad's house, and she ended up showing up at my old house, where I now have new tenants living. She knocked on the door, and the wife of the man I rented the house to answered the door. My ex-wife started freaking out about why I wasn't there and if she was my new girlfriend or something. The man's wife had to explain to her that they were tenants and that I had moved away, but Maria wouldn't listen. She told the woman she was a liar and I was inside of the house somewhere and that I needed to come out. Maria even went as far as to slap the woman when she told her that I was not there and that she needed to leave. Maria told her that if I wasn't there, then she needed to tell her where I moved to, but since Maria slapped this woman, she slammed the door on Maria's face and called the authorities, who came and arrested Maria for battery and trespassing. I wasn't at all surprised when I heard what Maria had done. She has been a gold digger her whole life, or for as long as I've known her. If it's not about money, then it's about what she can get from someone. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's a value. And the fact that she'll go as far as attack an innocent woman for no reason, it all tells me I made the right choice divorcing her when I did. I don't know what I ever saw in her, to be honest. Love truly is blind. And her brother, Jerome, is getting a few years in jail too for breaking into my home and attacking me with that baseball bat. Her family has got to learn something from all of this, but chances are they will keep operating the same way they always have. If it benefits them, then they will do anything and everything to make sure they get whatever they can, no matter what it takes to get a hold of it, even if it means spending time behind bars, which quite frankly suits them really well if you ask me. And I can promise you this, that this woman will never see a dime of my money, not even when I'm long gone and dead. I don't care what plan she comes up with next. It will never get her the riches she so desperately thinks she deserves but will never be capable of having. Now on to the next story. Story 6. I caught my wife sending nudes to my brother-in-law for money. Is this marriage savable? I really don't want to spam this sub. I posted this today morning, but when I returned from the office, my account was banned. This will be my last try to post this. My wife, Jessica, 34, and I, 35, have been married for 3 years and we dated for 2 years before that. We have a 2-year-old daughter. Jessica has 2 sisters. The eldest one, 38F, is married to Jake, 40M. A week ago, I came home from work early and wanted to scare Jessica. I tried to be sneaky, but somehow I slipped and accidentally hurt my back. Jessica came to my rescue. I went to the bedroom and she went to the kitchen to get an ice pack. Her phone was by the bed, and a WhatsApp notification came from Jake saying, "You've got the best pair I've ever seen." I immediately knew what was happening. I unlocked the phone and saw that she had just sent some pics and video of her tots to Jake, and there were no previous chats before that. When Jessica came back to the room, I showed her the chat and asked, "How long?" I have known this woman for 10 years, and I have never seen her so mortified. Her eyes got teary, and she said, "Babe, I am sorry, but I can explain." So I said, "Go on." According to her, at the end of 2019, she was struggling with money, and Jake suggested he would help her out. He hinted that he would like to see her pics. I feel like I am writing a pen script at this point, so she did send him pics and it continued over the years. She swears there was nothing emotional or physical involved. It was purely transactional. I didn't believe any of it, but she showed me on Venmo that MF paid her $300 yesterday. I then told her, "It's been 5 years. Try to remember if anything physical happened." For me, if even half of what she is saying is true, how could something like that not become physical? She started crying and told me she could prove it tomorrow because Jake would get suspicious if she tried to talk to him now. I took her phone, went to a bar, got wasted for the night, and when I came back, she was still there crying. I just slept on the couch. The next day morning, I gave her the phone. She called Jake. The conversation goes something like this. Jessica, hey, I was wondering if you want some more pics. Jake, I'm short on money. Yesterday, I spent all of it. Jessica, we can do something more this time and meet in person. I've changed my mind on that. Jake, no way. How much are we talking about? I felt like I was going to puke. I told her that we are done and left for the office. I am not a very wealthy dude, but I would consider myself a stable guy who could take care of his family. Now I just feel like I have failed as a man whose wife had to sell her body to meet her expected lifestyle. When I got home that night, she didn't look good. I asked Jessica why she kept taking money from him after we got married and why she didn't ask me while we were dating. She said she didn't know how to stop and that it was easy money. I left my home that night and told her she can keep the home and the car, but I want 50-50 custody of my child. So here I am now. Haven't told anyone about this. It's been a week since staying in a hotel. I go home in the evening to play with my daughter. I'm speaking with divorce lawyers, and Jessica is constantly talking about marriage counseling. Update. Before getting to the update, some people were asking me to get a paternity test. I don't need one. I know she is my daughter because I am Indian and Jessica, my wife, is white, and my daughter looks like me. Now for the update. After I made that post, I shared my situation with my cousin sister, 30F. She is the only family member I have living in the States. I visited her place the next day, and she knocked some sense into me. I realized part of me still didn't want a divorce because I basically married Jessica against my parents' will. They wanted me to have an arranged marriage, so my failed marriage would hurt my ego. She also arranged a meeting with a divorce lawyer, and no, I am not giving up my house. I was just emotional at that time. From what I understand in our state, adultery has pretty much zero impact on the assets, so it will likely be a 50-50th split. However, there is a high chance I can get better custody of my daughter because I have a job and Jessica doesn't. She is also involved in work at this point, which could work in my favor. My father-in-law called me last evening, and he was crying. He told me he didn't know what to say to me and that if he were in my place, he would have left her. Apparently, Jessica got scared and told her family everything after I didn't visit home for 2 days and had blocked her everywhere. I guess I should have done that a little while ago. And Jake is out of his house also, so I think I will go for a divorce because there is no point of reconciliation at this point when the whole relationship seems fake to me. Now on to the next story. Story 7. I'm falling in love with the man I was forced into marrying, and I don't know how to tell him. My husband and I's marriage was arranged when I was 16. He was 23 when they forced us together. I don't want to get into the ethics of this because I know it's bad, and even though it's their culture, their views are cruel and incredibly sexist. Luckily for me, my husband was a good man, and compared to most of my friends, my marriage was peaceful. He never hit me or treated me like a slave, and I'm so grateful to be married to him instead of anyone else. Our first year was incredibly painful because both of our parents demanded grandchildren, and neither of us were strong enough to resist them. At 17, after a few failed attempts, I was pregnant with twins. My husband promised me that after we received the positive results, he would never touch me again. This was something most men wouldn't have done. It was so painful for me. I cried every time we did it. I don't blame him for the bad experience since it was the first time for both of us. Nevertheless, that week made me never want to do it ever again. After my sons were born in a thankfully easy birth, we stayed in our country until I was 18. He then got a job in Canada, something we've been looking for since marriage. He's a doctor and a really good one at that. We left our family and moved here. We were finally free. Neither of us wanted to go back. He offered me a divorce if I wanted so I could have a new life. I thought about it, but since I didn't have an education, I couldn't work. I also figured his 2 sons would want a father in their life, so even though I didn't love him, I stayed and told him as much. We became more like friends. Our marriage only existed on paper, but he was never bad to me. He gave me money to spend and would buy things, and I would cook him his favorite food and keep the house nice for him and do all the chores. Our children never knew that their parents didn't love each other because we were always nice to each other. When we got here, I asked him if I could get an education, and he enrolled me in a local university to study business. I'm almost done now, so I finally start working and do something with my life other than sit in my house all day going crazy. After a few months here, he sat me down and told me that he had urges that only a woman could fill, but he didn't want to hurt me and wouldn't force me to do anything. He asked for my permission to be with other women, and I said yes, as long as he hid it from other people and our kids. I didn't care what he did. He would go out every Friday and come back happy, and I was just happy that he was satisfied. I didn't love him, but I cared for him like I would a friend. When lockdown started in mid-2020, I got very sick early. He pulled a lot of strings so I could get the best care in the hospital he worked at. I was useless for almost a month and a half, and he was amazing. He looked after my needs, kept my sons happy, and worked at the same time. What really sparked my love was how he treated me when I was in immense pain. I was at home then, but I still couldn't really do anything without getting out of breath. It was nighttime, and he was helping me get into bed, but I was struggling for some reason, and my entire body felt like it was on fire. I was trying really hard not to cry, and he noticed. He carried me to our room, sat down on the bed, and laid my head on his lap. He started to stroke my hair while singing to me until I fell asleep. When I woke up, he had fallen asleep in that position because I was sleeping on him. I didn't want to wake him, so I covered him with a blanket and hugged him until he woke up an hour later. He was so tender with me. Even after I was cured, he was still so kind to me. I could feel myself slipping into love with him. When I was grumpy, he'd make me coffee. When I was sad, he'd hug me. Everything about the way he treated me was wonderful. When I went through a period after my sickness where I thought I was ugly, he started to tell me I was beautiful several times during the day, something he still does. I started to work out with him last summer, and I know it seems a bit boastful, but I like to think I'm attractive now. Men started to flirt with me, and even though I would never stray, he is always so positive of me. It just made me love him more. He's amazing to our sons too. He's so patient and helpful, even though it's not his duty. I don't remember a single conversation I had with my father where he didn't yell at me. But when my husband talks to my sons, he's thoughtful, gentle, and kind. But he doesn't love me. I was touching him a lot more, and he started to hug me before work and after. I asked him to even start to sleep in the same bed and cuddle me. He rests his head on my chest, and I pet his hair until he falls asleep. And even the way he breathes on me is just perfect. I don't know how to describe it, but I think he looks the most attractive while asleep in my arms. Co was the best thing that ever happened to me because I fell in love with my husband. But after the lockdown ended, he started to go out every Friday again. Every time he leaves after our children go to sleep, my heart would hurt. I hate that he sleeps with other women, even though I know it's my fault. I know that he would stop if I asked, but it would be selfish of me to deny his urges when I can't satisfy him. He even asked me after the lockdown ended if I was okay with him still going out. I wanted to say no, but said yes anyways. I ended up crying myself to sleep while holding his shirt that night. A few weeks ago, I followed him and watched him go out for dinner with a beautiful blonde woman. They were flirting so much and did the deed in his car. We have 2 cars, and he uses that one only for his dates so that me and my sons will never notice anything. They went to a cheap hotel for 3 hours. They were on the first floor with a window open, and I watched them do so many things in so many positions that I felt gross. But I was also so jealous of that woman. He texted me that he was coming home, something he always says, even though I'm usually asleep. I drove back home before he came out, and I made him a snack. He was surprised that I was awake and asked if I was waiting for him, and I asked him how it was. He was uncomfortable talking about it, but I just wanted to know more, so he told me everything. Her name, that he tries to hire her at least once a month, what they do, and so much more. He calls the company, and he hires a girl from them every weekend. He tries to get the same girl each time because they have a good connection in bed. I want him to do all those things with me, but at the same time I remember how much it hurt and don't want to. If I tell him that I love him, I know that he would stop going out, but he wouldn't be as happy. I'm also worried that I won't know how to do it since the last time was when I was 16. I know he won't enjoy it with me since I can't do the things those other women can. Even so, watching him enjoy other women from the side because I gave him permission stabs my heart every time. I don't know how to tell him I love him without hurting myself or making him less happy. Please, if anyone has any advice, let me know. I'm worried that it might be too late. Now on to the next story. Story 8. I'm breaking off my engagement because my fiancé might get sick in the future. My fiancé and I have been together for 5 years. He's the love of my life, and I literally can't imagine being without him. So the thought of doing this is making my stomach roll. He was adopted, and neither he nor his parents knew much about his medical history. A few weeks ago, he met his biological brother for the first time and found out that his birth father had passed from Huntington's disease. There's a 50% chance that my fiancé also has the genetic defect that causes Huntington's, but he refuses to get tested. It's not the disease I'm scared of. It's the not knowing. If we know he'll get it, we can prepare financially, practically, and emotionally. He says a positive test result will hold him back from living his life, but I feel like it's the opposite. How can we live with this giant maybe looming over us? How can I make smart decisions on where to live, how to budget, or even whether or not to have biological children with this man if I'm not allowed to have all the facts? So I've come to the decision that I have to break it off. I respect his decision, but I can't understand or accept it. I have literally no one I can talk to about this because it's his effing secret and not mine to tell. Edit. I have to go to work now, but I'll try to continue responding throughout the day, especially to the comments that exactly mirror the descending voice in my head. I just want to clarify a few things up here. 1. I would not leave him if he tested positive for the defect. I would not leave him if he got sick. I just want a plan for us to be able to afford the best life and care for him if he does, which means we have to start immediately. 2. I don't want or need perfect children. That isn't realistic. But it is possible to avoid them being subjected to a 50-50 chance of having this disease. Of course, there are alternative options, but again, they involve preparation and planning. I'm more than willing to take a full genetic panel as well. 3. Yes, one or both of us could get cancer or permanently disabled in an accident or any other number of things. But I've come to learn that you can't plan for every unpredictable thing life throws at you. This is the rare occasion that we do have the opportunity to prepare for. Essentially, it comes down to the fact that we're incompatible, regardless of how much we love each other. I'm a planner and he's very laid back. Until now, these traits have complemented each other, but unfortunately, they brought us to an impasse that I don't think we can both move forward from happily. Second edit. I'm floored at all of these responses, supportive and otherwise. At the very least, I feel validated that this is a complex issue with no clear and obvious answer. I've decided to take a few steps back. Those of you who brought up the fact that a few weeks is probably too little time for him to fully process his possible diagnosis have a really valid point. Just because I want to immediately jump into problem-solving mode doesn't mean it's necessarily the right thing to do here. So I'm not leaving yet, at least, and hopefully never. I'm going to find a therapist to help me work through my anxieties and give my fiancé some space, not literal, to work through his, and then we'll revisit this conversation, hopefully with more patience on my part and willingness to act on his. Third edit. I know my title sucks. Sorry, but I can't do anything about it now. It sounded fine at 6 a.m. when I made the post. Update. I'm breaking off my engagement because my fiancé might get sick in the future. Hi, remember me? I posted earlier this year about my fiancé who was refusing to get tested for Huntington's after learning he had a 50-50th chance of having the genetic defect. Some of you gave me great advice and support. Others, the wake-up call I needed. And the rest of you, well, ready to read it? I'm not sure if it was obvious, but I was not in a good place when I made that post. When I stress, I don't sleep or eat for him. It may have only been a few weeks to accept the situation, but for me it was a few long weeks of non-stop anxiety where I was lucky to get even an hour of restless sleep a night. I was plain exhausted on top of everything else and only began to consider leaving when I started to hit my breaking point. Anyway, we talked about it at length, we cried, we fought, we researched, I showed him empathy, we consulted with friends, family, and specialists, we pressed pause for days or weeks when we needed a break from the whole damn thing, and in the end, he agreed to have the test. Guys, to say we dodged an absolute maelstrom of bullets would be putting it mildly. He's negative both for developing the disease himself as well as the risk of passing it on. No matter what else happens, this is one area where he's assuredly safe. All of this said, once the euphoria faded, we decided it was necessary to put a hold on our engagement and take some time apart. I still love him with all my heart, but this was our first serious disagreement as a couple, and it forced us to seriously reflect on ourselves and our relationship. Neither of our positions were wrong, but they were so disparate that there was no realistic compromise. I've spent the last few months traveling abroad, and other than a few texts, we haven't spoken much. But I'm home now, and we have our second first date tonight. Wish me luck. Edit. I mentioned this a million times in my first post, but here goes again. I had no plans to leave if he tested positive. I just needed to know so that we could plan our lives accordingly. We decided together to take a break. It's been an incredibly difficult, emotionally charged roller coaster of a year. I didn't leave him. We planned from day one to keep communication to a minimum. It was difficult. I actually began keeping a journal of all the things I wanted to call or text him about. It's extensive, and I can't wait to share it with him. I didn't give him an ultimatum, but I understand why that's the takeaway. I only told Reddit that I was thinking of leaving, and I know that it was rational/irrational. 1. No, I'm not going to kill myself. Sorry if that disappoints you. 2. Why does everyone seem to think that traveling means sleeping around? 3. Just gonna leave a little timeline here for those of you who think I've been traveling since my last post. 4. He learned that he was at risk of developing HD. 5. I posted on Reddit when I reached my own breaking point and needed to vent about how I was affected. 6. We spent the next 3-ish months discussing next steps, consulting professionals, meeting others in our situation, etc. 7. He made his own decision to get tested. 8. That took a while since there are a lot of steps you have to go through before they'll even agree to do it. 9. We learned he's negative. 10. We rode the emotional high for a bit, then realized we weren't the same people we were at the beginning of the year and no longer knew how to be together normally, given everything we learned about ourselves and each other during the hardest of situations. 11. We decided to take a break and meet for dinner on September 16th. 12. I'm now getting ready to leave for said dinner. I meant to say this last time too. Thank you to all of you who are sharing your stories about HD, chronic illness, and love. I'm sorry I haven't responded to everyone, but I'm reading all of them and wishing you and your loved ones nothing but health and happiness. Additional update. In the comments, OP also found this post and left a comment. Oh my god. I'm so happy I found this post after losing an entire day to defending myself on Reddit. My own fault, LOL. It happened last time too. The positive tone here is amazing. Thank you all for reading and commenting. I promise I'll come back tomorrow to let you know how our date went. I have butterflies, and I can't remember the last time I felt like this. Our True Off Matches doesn't allow links, so I hope you guys don't mind if I leave this here. I've been completely humbled by this disease, and we're one of the lucky ones. Second update. I'm breaking off my engagement because my fiancé might get sick in the future. No, I'm not. This is about our date. This title continues to be embarrassingly bad and now irrelevant, but I kind of feel like I'm stuck with it now. Sorry if you're new here. My fiancé found out he was at risk of developing Huntington's disease. I wanted him to get tested, and he did not. Months later, he did, and thank God he was negative. The whole thing put such a strain on us that we decided to take a break. Last night, we went on our second first date, and I can't believe how many of you want to hear about it. Of course, I couldn't leave you hanging, but there are a few things I want to address first, so please bear with me for a few more sentences. It feels like many of you are determined for there to be a bad guy here, but please don't put this label on my fiancé. He doesn't deserve it. He's not a jerk or an ostrich. He's a man who was suddenly forced to face his own mortality. He had a very human response, and I didn't make it any easier on him during those first few weeks. On that note, it's great that so many of you guys always react perfectly to every tough situation life throws at you. I'm sadly not like that. Sometimes I up like I did by not initially giving him enough time to process, but I owned up to that, took several steps back, and he forgave me. I don't know what else you want from me. Lastly, there are a lot of comments about how the obvious compromise was to just act like he had it. But you know what? It was the idea of living like he was dying that actually drove him to get tested. He didn't want us to unnecessarily save half our paychecks instead of using them to enjoy life or deal with the complications of IVF if we don't have to, or forego opportunities that didn't play nicely with the end-of-life care plans we'd be making. Essentially, he concluded, in his words, that the cat was already halfway out of the bag, and it could come out, but it was never going back in. If he was positive, we'd be obsessing over every little thing being a possible symptom, but if we left things as they were, we'd be doing that anyway. That doesn't mean it was easy at all. We actually had to make a second appointment to get the results because he couldn't bring himself to hear them the first time. But that was okay. I was there for him the whole time to support him however he needed me to. Okay, I'm done with that. On to what you actually clicked for. Do you guys know the feeling of watching your favorite childhood movie for the first time in years and being nervous that it won't hold up or have the same magic you remember? That's kind of what I was feeling yesterday. And I actually have to thank everyone jumping down my throat in the comments because you did a great job of distracting me from the butterflies in my stomach. Well, the magic was still there. We may have spent months apart, but it didn't feel that way at all. In fact, everything felt even better and more comfortable than when we parted. We felt like the happy couple we'd been back in January before this whole thing started. It was like there was a weight hanging over our relationship that was keeping us from actually moving forward, despite the good news, and it's finally been lifted. Before last night, I couldn't remember the last time anything with him felt bright and easy, but we're back, baby. I know the general consensus was that this was a dumb move, that we should have opted for marriage counseling instead of going our own ways for a bit. I'm not a relationship counselor. I'm not recommending this method to anyone. I don't know why it worked for us. All I know is that we were both so drained at the time, and we each had the same gut feeling that a complete separation was what we needed. Our relationship had become far more exhausting than fun, and I honestly believe that we wouldn't have made it if we'd forced ourselves to work together to fix it. Again, don't take relationship advice from me, but trust your instincts. You have them for a reason, and I'm sure you'll be happy to know that he wasn't sitting at home pining for me while I traipsed around Europe, not having intimacy with people. He was busy with his own adventure. He bought a car, we live in Manhattan, so that's a pretty big thing, and road tripped across the country. We stayed up all night sharing stories and pictures and telling each other about the people we've met. It was absolutely amazing sharing our experiences with each other. I know it may seem like it would have been better if we'd done it together, but there was something really special about living it through each other's eyes. Anyway, we have the rest of our lives to travel the world together because we're not breaking up. Suck on the people who were hoping he'd leave me. Look, we know this new honeymoon period wherein won't last forever, but I really think we're prepared to handle whatever other challenges life tries to throw at us. Honestly, there's a pretty good chance we've already gotten through the worst one, knock wood. But even if there's something bigger and better waiting for us, I'm completely optimistic we'll be okay. So that's that. We've officially reached the other side of our first major life issue together. Did either of us behave perfectly? No. Are we going to be perfect next time? Probably not. Are we 100% committed to combining our completely opposite ways of dealing with crises into a superpower designed to crush conflict like a 90s cartoon? Absolutely. Thanks for listening to my story, everyone. Now on to the next story. Story 9. My 32F father, 60s, has been married to Sasha, fake name, 40s, for almost a decade. I was already an adult when they started seeing each other, so I never had much of a relationship with her. That said, Sasha was nice and thoughtful, though a bit annoying at times, and I never had any problems with her. I now have a husband, 34M, and 2 kids, 9M and 4F. Sasha is very fond of my children, especially my daughter. That became very suffocating pretty quickly, so we started setting some boundaries. She never overstepped them. In January, my father and Sasha decided to go on a trip to Disney World and invited us to join them. We decided to go to celebrate our son's 9th birthday. I quickly regretted coming along. Sasha spent the entire trip fussing over my daughter in ways that overstepped almost every boundary we'd set. Examples include, Sasha bought a mini ears tiara. She wanted me to buy my daughter an identical one so they could match. My daughter didn't like the tiara, so I bought her a Donald Duck hat instead. Sasha got her the tiara anyway and was upset that she didn't want to wear it. My father and Sasha went shopping in between parks. I told them not to buy my kids anything as we still had shopping to do and didn't want to risk making our bags too heavy. Still, Sasha returned with 5 bags of clothing for my daughter and 2 for my son, saying she couldn't resist it. My daughter wanted a Belle costume to wear at the parks, as that's her favorite princess. Sasha tried to convince us to get her an Ariel costume instead because that's her favorite. I explained that we never watched The Little Mermaid at home because my daughter is scared of Ursula. Sasha insisted on taking dozens of pictures with my daughter in front of the castle at Magic Kingdom. She also took some with my son, but not nearly as many. She tried to convince us to take our daughter to Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique. We refused because the prices are crazy, and we'd already bought her the Belle costume. She offered to pay, but we held our ground. I later found out Sasha tried to make a reservation anyway, but there was no availability. When we took our daughter to Slinky Dog Dash, her first roller coaster, Sasha tried to sit next to her. My daughter wanted to sit with me, so we switched. She tried to do the same thing in other attractions. At the Muppets Theater, she tried to get my daughter to sit in her lap. Sasha also tried to pick her up while we met some of the characters. There were more instances. The final straw for me, however, was the last park day of the trip. We were at Magic Kingdom. My husband suffered a minor injury, and I had to take him to the first aid station. The kids wanted to go to the Peter Pan ride, so my dad and Sasha offered to take them in the meantime. However, according to my father, the line was too long, so instead, Sasha suggested the Little Mermaid ride, assuring my kids Ursula wasn't on it. Actually, there's a pretty big Ursula animatronic there. My daughter was still sobbing and hugging her brother when we reunited. When we flew back home, I told my father that we'd no longer take our children on trips with Sasha due to her behavior. He got extremely angry. He said his wife loved my kids, thought about what they'd like to do at every moment of the trip, and that we should be grateful to have her in our lives. I lost my temper at that. I told him Sasha was a creep and that they should be grateful I was still okay with them even seeing my children after her actions during the trip. We ended up having a huge fight after that. It's been weeks since we returned home, and my father is still angry at me and my husband. Sasha has texted me a few times. She says she's sorry if she made me uncomfortable, but that she loves my kids and hopes to use the trip to spend more time with them. To be honest, I don't think I'm the here, but I do think I might have overreacted. I believe there's a chance Sasha's actions were motivated by love, and she truly did have good intentions. Update. Hey everyone, I'm ready to give you an update. I read your comments and came to the following conclusion. As much as Sasha's behavior towards my children angered me and freaked me out, calling her a creep was the wrong reaction to have. That said, I think it's best for my family to distance itself from Sasha for the time being, and at the very least, my previous decision to avoid future trips with her based on the Disney trip is still the best course of action. Sasha's pushiness, tendency to override my and my husband's parenting, and blatant favoritism towards my daughter were much worse when the kids were younger. After my daughter's birth, she began to focus too much attention on her and almost none on my son. I gave more examples of that in the comments on my original post. That's the reason we set boundaries in the first place. The way she fusses over my daughter also bothers me. When we had the boundary conversation with my father and Sasha, she told us that she'd always wondered what having a daughter would be like. She'd also defined herself as child-free before, so I was never certain what to think of that. Either way, that reassured me and my husband that we were doing the best for our kids. Those boundaries had never been overstepped. Then we went on the Disney trip, and most of them were completely ignored. Many of you pointed out that she might have gotten carried away or that Disney is exciting, and she wanted to make sure my kids had the best experience, etc. There are 2 things I'll say to that. The first is that whatever Sasha's reasons were, she still overstepped our boundaries. When we first set those, we told her that doing so would have consequences. Disney or not, I don't see a reason to make an exception. Secondly, she wasn't trying to ensure my kids had the best experience. She was pushing them to fulfill her fantasy of what their Disney trip should look like. She repeatedly ignored my children's wishes in favor of her own, despite them both being very clear about what they wanted and didn't want. Sasha also continually favored my daughter, including during my son's birthday, and fussed over her in ways that made her uncomfortable. And I still haven't forgiven the Little Mermaid thing. My daughter is a bit shy and takes a while to open up to most people, so knowing her trust was broken like that angers me in ways I can't describe. To put it in simpler terms, my children aren't props, and whoever treats them as such will, at the very least, be put in timeout. I called my father and Sasha on Saturday. I apologized for calling Sasha a creep, but told them that we needed some time apart. They won't see my family until my younger sister's birthday in late April. If that goes well, they'll be invited to my daughter's 5th birthday party in May. After that, we'll slowly work on reestablishing contact. I also said that if they overstepped our boundaries again, the consequences would be more dire. My father didn't take it well. I don't care. Sasha sent me a text with more apologies, followed by a request to at least FaceTime my kids every now and then. I said no. And to those who said my controlling behavior ruined the trip, my kids had an amazing time at Disney World. They're both still talking about it. My daughter keeps asking us to put her pictures with the characters she met up on the wall, and my son says he had the best birthday ever. I think that's it. Thank you for your advice and support on my first post. Relevant comments. You protected your children, and that's the best thing you can do in any situation. I'm glad they're still talking about the trip despite favoritism and the Ursula animatronic, which means you and your husband managed to outshine all of that with wonderful memories. For the possible reconciliation, everyone can act normal for a day, the birthday in late April, especially if they know there's a goalpost on that day. It's the behavior over time that counts. If they're still messaging you, requesting FaceTime calls, and calling you unreasonable despite you clearly saying you want NC, you could begin a tally, 1 point for each request, and when it's X amount of points, they'll have their timeout extended because they obviously don't understand boundaries yet. Update 2 months later. Last time I posted here, I mentioned that my father and Sasha wouldn't see my children until my younger sister's birthday. The party took place last weekend, and we didn't attend. These 2 months of no contact worked fine, but not great. My father respected my wishes, to my surprise, but Sasha kept trying to find ways to talk to my children. She'd call me under the guise of needing to ask me something, only to later say, "By the way, are the kids around? I want to say hi." Every time she tried that, I'd remind her of what I told her back in March. This must have happened almost a dozen times, which was enough for my husband and me to start debating on skipping the party. After speaking to our kids, we decided not to go. They both said they missed my father, but clearly didn't want to see Sasha. We thought about attending and just distancing them from her while there, but risking making our children uncomfortable wasn't worth it. My son even asked if we could see their aunt somewhere else without Sasha around. My husband and I explained the situation to my sister. She was upset, but mostly because she hadn't seen the kids in a while. We all went to dinner at her favorite restaurant the day after her party. I also called my father and told him we wouldn't go to the birthday party. He reacted better than I expected, but we still had a short fight about it. He claimed that I had promised we'd let Sasha see the kids after 2 months, called me unfair, and said he was entitled to have a relationship with his grandchildren. I immediately denied that, though I tried to sugarcoat it at first. I eventually gave him the truth. My kids don't want to see his wife, and I won't force them to. My father and I had a long talk. I told him how much Sasha's actions at the Disney trip upset my children, as well as how uncomfortable me and my husband felt. I admitted I don't trust his wife at all, and I don't think I ever truly will. He said that while he still thought I was overreacting, he understood I wanted to protect my kids. My dad also told me about how these 2 months of NC were for them. Apparently, Sasha started talking about my kids, mostly my daughter, a lot more than usual. She'd mention things and places she thought they would like. My father was aware of one of the times she called me, but thought it was a one-time thing. She wanted to give my daughter a gift at my sister's birthday party. He said he didn't know why. At one point, she told him she wanted to plan another family vacation with the kids, even though I told them they're not traveling with Sasha anymore. Learning all of that just made me more certain that I can't trust this woman around my children. For now, I intend to remain LC with my father and NC with Sasha. My daughter told me she wanted her grandpa at her birthday party a few weeks from now, so I told him that he was invited, but Sasha wasn't. He agreed. To be honest, I don't trust my father after all of this. I'm allowing him to come because that party will take place at my home, which is easier for me to control. If he tries to bring Sasha, they'll both be kicked out, and it will take a long time for me to consider letting him near my kids again. My father hasn't told me how his wife is reacting to this. My sister told me that during her party, Sasha asked her to tell me she wanted to talk. I'm not reaching out to her, nor do I plan to respond if she attempts to contact me. Both me and my husband have blocked her. My children are doing great. They still talk about how much fun they had at Disney. My daughter's been saving money, putting coins in her piggy bank, for us to go back. On a completely different note, I'm pregnant again. This was completely unplanned. I always said I wanted 2 kids at most, and the third would have to be a huge accident, but my husband and I are ecstatic. I'm still in the first trimester, so not a lot of people know. We are brainstorming ways to tell our kids. Overall, I'm happy with my life right now, and as much as I wish this Sasha situation had never happened, I feel like a better parent after dealing with it. I have never been more confident in my abilities to protect my children than I am now. I don't think I'll update again anytime soon. Once again, thank you for all the support you've given me. I wish you the best. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.